Welcome back, everyone, to a special 3-hour edition of The Weekend. Yes, we've already been on for an hour already if you're just joining us. 12 New Yorkers have affirmed the principle that no one in America, not even a former president, is above the law. In a historic ruling, a jury unanimously found Donald Trump guilty on 30 counts of falsifying business records. Now, the criminal case hinged on the testimony and the evidence of the trial's narrator, Trump's fixer turned foe, Michael Cohen. And Michael Cohen joins us here now. He's the author of Disloyal, the true story of the former personal attorney to President Donald J. Trump, and Revenge, how Donald Trump weaponized the U.S. Department of Justice against his critics. He's also the host of the Mea Culpa and Political Beatdown podcast. Thank you, Michael Cohen, for joining us.
I seem so busy, don't I? I'm actually really not.
Just a busy guy. So I wanted to set a little context here because when this all began for you, in many respects, at that time, Trump is in the White House. You had got caught up in this thing, were on your way to prison. How now, having this come full circle and watching what occurred this week, do you appreciate that role, that narration? Because I thought that was very interesting and important for you to frame this chapter in this context, because you knew how everybody else was going to come at it. But for you, it was like, it's time to tell my story and to tell this the way it occurred, the things that happened, what I saw, what I heard, and what I did for Donald Trump.
So I've been trying to tell the same story for 6 years. I couldn't get the story out against the Trump mega microphone machine with all of the crazy GOP members of Congress and the sycophants. So I wrote a New York Times best-selling book. It still didn't work. I wrote a second New York Times best-selling book. It still didn't work. Now at least I had the platform at a trial, the first in U.S. history of a former president to be held accountable for the things that I've been talking about for 6 years. Remember, the DA's case didn't start when I was released from Otisville. It started while I was in Otisville. 3 times the Manhattan DA's team came to visit me there.
So that's where it began for you.
That's where it really all began. That's where this saga began.
Mm-hmm.
You know, prior to the start of the trial, you were very careful, I think, not to discuss anything that the Manhattan DA's office had discussed with you. You wanted to protect the integrity of the trial. Now that the verdict has come down and that piece of the trial is over, we move on to sentencing. I'm wondering what the initial conversation you had with the Manhattan DA's office when you found out that they were actually going to bring this case forward. What was that conversation?
Remember, there were 2 separate DAs that were involved in this case. First, it was Cy Vance. So again, when I was in Otisville, it was Cy Vance's team. And then I had met with Mark Pomerantz when I was ultimately released from Otisville as a result of COVID. Then that case sort of went away. And we all remember that whole story with Mark Pomerantz. And then Alvin Bragg became the district attorney, and he took up the mantle. But he was looking at a different set of charges than what Cy Vance was looking at. And a lot of people, myself included, were very disappointed because they believed that there was more than enough in the other set of charges to come against Trump and hold him accountable for those crimes. Well, I guess we were all wrong, and I'm the first one to be able to admit that I was wrong. Alvin Bragg certainly brought the right case. 12 jurors unanimously decided on 34 counts guilt.
Todd Blanche was on the Today Show on Friday talking about the prospects of an appeal. Take a listen, and then we'll talk about it.
You're confident on appeal.
Yes.
What's your number one issue? Don't give me a legal brief that you haven't written yet.
I think the recusal issue is meaningful. I think the statute of limitations, the way that the background of why this case was brought is meaningful. I think that the witnesses, I do not think Michael Cohen should ever be somebody who can be relied upon to convict somebody.
You're part of the case. Now you get to be part of the appeal.
Oh, thank you very much, Todd. You know, I have a name for Todd.
I do
Blanche. It's called Sloat, stupidest lawyer of all time. Let me be very clear, Todd. all right, because I'm sure he's watching like everybody else. I mean, great ratings, by the way.
Right?
Thank you.
He's the stupidest lawyer of all time. Why? Because you don't make the defense of a case like this. Let's discredit one of the witnesses. Let's discredit the narrator of the story. There are 19 other people that were called by the Manhattan District Attorney, the prosecutors, by Susan Hoffinger, by Josh Steinglass, obviously Alvin Bragg leading the charge. 19 people testified, which all corroborated, again, the narrative of my story. What I had been saying, again, for 6 years, corroborated by 19 independent people, some of whom, by the way, worked for Trump and still remain loyal to him.
Is it your instinct, though, that they had trouble formulating an alternative defense, or is it your instinct that Donald Trump was calling the shots and said, just go after Cohen?
Combination of both.
Yeah, I think so.
Guaranteed, it's all predicated around Donald Trump calling the shots. I've seen him do it going back to 2007 when I started working for him. He calls the shots. It's the wrong thing to do. You don't allow your client to dictate to you the terms of your defense, especially when you're talking about something as important as this case. What you do is you turn around and you let them create the defense. You could participate in it as a client, but you don't dictate the terms of the defense. It is, again, stupid, which is why I call him the slope.
They want to make this about you, but I mean, there's a paper trail. There are documents here that corroborated and that held up everything that you said. And it wasn't just you. There was David Pecker, and there was Hope Hicks.
And Keith Davidson. And there was Jeff McConney, and there was Deborah Tarasov.
I mean, Alan Weisselberg wrote the crime down on a piece of paper. What is your sense of... Why didn't they come for David Pecker in the way that they came for you and the way that they came for Stormy Daniels? And why were they not more critical of Hope Hicks?
Yeah, well, Hope Hicks is sort of the poster child for, she's young, she's attractive, she's intelligent, and she's very soft-spoken. So she is like, we'll call it a prosecutor's dream poster child, despite the fact she was involved in so many aspects of what was going on there. Me, New Yorker, brazen, brash, easy to attack me. Why the Southern District of New York did what they did, why they gave David Pecker and Alan Weisselberg immunity in order to testify against me, to this day, nobody can give me that answer. It doesn't make any sense.
How then do you should we be processing? Alicia raised the part about the appeals and the next level up of this and the level of involvement you're going to have there. You have these other narratives, though, Michael, that are out there around you, around others, in terms of Donald Trump is the victim here. But the one thing your narrative makes very clear, and I think is going to be important on the appeal, is Donald Trump was the architect of a lot of this. He's a micromanager of micromanagers. So he's not one of these guys, one of these CEOs who sits back and then every quarter gets a debriefing on what happened in the last 3 months. He's involved day in and day out. Do you think that narrative reinforces the argument as it gets in front of an appeals court? In other words, this is less about Michael Cohen, despite what Trump's lawyers are saying, and it really is, as the 12 jurors decided, all about Trump.
Yeah. So remember that, and Donald has put this in many of his books. If you come at him, he's going to come at you 10 times harder. Mm-hmm. I seem to be the only one who has stood up. And I shouldn't say the only one. Stormy Daniels certainly has. Right, E. Jean Carroll has. I'm talking about in this specific narrative. I'm certainly front and center onto it. And so his feeling is not only do I need to knock Michael down, but I need to also set an example for others that you don't want to be Michael Cohen. You don't want to be taking the blows that I and the members of Congress that are supporting me are going to be coming at you.
So what's the difference?
This is a mafia message.
But what's the difference between you and Weisselberg? Weisselberg is like, don't know nothing, not saying nothing.
Well, Weisselberg is still in the camp. He's still in the cult, and he will not testify against Donald Trump. He has the right under law not to testify. Could take the fifth, and that's what he did. And as a direct result, he's now spending some more time at Rikers Island.
He's in Rikers. Like
Second time.
I'm struck by that. I mean, y'all ain't been to Rikers, but I'm struck by the fact that when you went to prison, you went to jail for, as I've heard Nicole Wallace say many times, you did not have the sexual encounter with the young lady. It wasn't even you. But you were at this point, the one person that was held accountable for everything that went on. And that was a inflection point for you. Why do you not think that's been an inflection point for someone like Allen Weisselberg?
There's no way to explain why he refuses to provide the testimony that we all know that he has. I mean, as you stated earlier, it's in his handwriting. It has his initials next to it. It's got one of the checks, actually two of the checks, have his name written on the bottom of it. So why he refuses to do it? Nobody. He's under an agreement. He gets a severance of like $2 million if he doesn't testify. I mean, talk about obstruction of justice. Look,
and that was something that wasn't able to come up in court, by the way.
Right.
That was something that they were not
permitted to do that. Right. Talk about the severance. So we'll
court.
just talk about it here on the weekend. Another thing that we should talk about that nobody else seems to be talking about is yesterday's wackadoodle press conference.
Oh, we're going to get to that. You know what, Michael Cohen, can we take a break? And then we're going to talk about that press conference on the other side of the break.
If you insist, it is your show.
Well, we appreciate that. We're going to continue the conversation. Yes, I need a sip. So right after, you're watching The Weekend, folks. Stay with us. Cohen, before we went to break, you were talking about the press conference, and let's just be clear, it was not a press conference. It was a statement that was with the press as the audience, because at a press conference you take questions, that Donald Trump did on Friday.
Yeah, filled with a whole bunch of people that work in the building and so on. But as I was watching it, I just decided I had to put out something onto my Twitter account. I wrote, Trump's press conference was nothing shy of a bat-S crazy avalanche of broken brain word manure. Because that's really what it was. It was a rambling series of nonsense. But here's something that's interesting that no one's talking about. We're going to break it right here on The Weekend. He's not even allowed to do that press conference in Trump Tower.
Why not? Because
he doesn't own the public space. If you look outside the door, it says open to the public. He gave away that space years ago, 40-plus years ago, in order to build the residential portion. That's how he obtained the FAR, the air rights, in order to go as high as he did for that property. He does not own it. Therefore, you need a permit. He was warned of this in 2016 during the campaign. But does Donald Trump care about the law? No. The same way he put out the clock on Fifth Avenue without permits. I mean, he just does things. The law doesn't apply to him the way it applies to the rest of us.
I think that's an important point, and it's a part of the psychology of Trump that I've always been fascinated by. And in my encounters with him earlier on in 13 or whatever, and then just watching him subsequently, it is very clear he's a man who believes I will do it unless you stop me. And he doesn't believe you can stop him. And there is some truth to that, Michael. I mean, you look at how our systems, our judicial system, our political systems, our media have just capitulated to his brand, his level of pugnacious, offensive behavior, treating it as entertainment, treating it as politically prescient in terms of how Republicans look at it. What is it about him that allows him to your point, do the thing he's not allowed by law or by principle to do, and yet everything around him just kind of goes, okay.
Except, I will note, we're having this conversation in the context of the fact that he has been convicted of 34 felony counts
I got that, but we are,
and $500 million in the New York Attorney General case, and another $100 million.
But folks,
just
we are 8 years. We're 8 years into this, so we're at now we're at that point. But look at all the terrain that has been disrupted and burned to the ground before we got to that point. And that's what I'm talking. This accountability now is important, but along the way it wasn't there. So my question is, what was it about him that made people feel, I mean, the lawyers that didn't get paid, the people, and yet they come back, the banks who, had defaults, and yet they would give him a loan the next time. What is it?
Yeah, it's unexplainable. I mean, I truly don't understand it either. Now, is Donald Trump entertaining? Absolutely. I mean, first of all, the Oompa Loompa-ish sort of look that goes on. I mean, how many people have made fun of the orange tan or the cotton candy hair and so on for years? He actually embraces the attacks. He believes anything negative said about him is a positive. I mean, that's a narcissistic sociopath by design. What he does is he makes everything about him. And for whatever the reason, people just go along. He brings out the worst in people
and they seem to like it.
They not only do they like it, they embrace it and they run with it.
And I want to know,
not like it. He about to go to jail, maybe. Okay,
well, let's talk about that, because two questions for you. One, which is, having gone through this pre-sentencing hearing, I want to hear from you sort of what that experience is like and how you think he's going to do it. I've also heard you say you don't think he should go to prison, and I want to understand more about why.
Okay, so the first part, yes, I did go through that process, the pre-sentencing report, so thanks for bringing up a bad memory. Sure. It's a horrible process. You sit down with an individual and you basically have to open up your entire life to them, whether it's financial, whether it's medical. They need to know everything. And it is based upon that document that gets submitted to the judge for review, and the judge uses that in determining the sentence. Now, here we see, once again, to Mike's point, Donald is bombastic. They want to call me the bombastic one. They thought I was going to come onto the stand with a baseball bat or a 9-iron and start swinging it. Donald Trump is the only one every single day who went out there and attacked everybody, right? And again, he had a whole slew of members of Congress sitting behind him doing the same thing. That's going to determine the sentence, including the violations of the gag order, which I believe he did again yesterday. I still think the gag order is in place, and his behavior, his 10-minute rambling about me, he's violating the gag order. Do I think that he's going to be convicted? Absolutely. 100%. Do I think that Judge Merchan is going to sentence him to prison or to jail? The answer is no.
Right, but do you think you've also said that you don't think he should be sentenced to jail? And
I'm afraid of him going to jail.
Why?
And not for him, not for his safety. That's on him. He's got Secret Service protection. I'm more concerned for you and for all of us and our families and for the American people, because this clown had 4 years of being debriefed on national security issues. On top of that, if he becomes the Republican nominee, he gets debriefed again starting now. Think about this. America, think about this for a second. You have now a Republican leading candidate who is a felon who's going to be debriefed on national security issues, knowing how loose-lipped he is, how he's willing to give away America's secrets to Vladimir Putin or to anybody for money or just simply for bragging rights. He did it with the Australian billionaire at Mar-a-Lago. He sat there in Helsinki with Vladimir Putin talking about national security issues, but nobody else was around except for Vladimir Putin's translator. I mean, these are not normal things. You don't allow somebody like Donald Trump to be declassified, especially now as a felon. So my concern is, in a prison situation, he's willing to give away these secrets, as I always say, for a bag of tuna or a book of stamps. And he will do it because he doesn't care. If America turns against him, he'd rather see America burned to the ground. And that's who Donald Trump is, plain and simple.
That part I believe. That I believe. Although I think his behind needs to go to jail. But
well, you know what, Michael Cohen, will you stay for a little longer?
For you, absolutely.
We appreciate you. Michael Cohen is going to be here, and we will be right back. You're watching The Weekend.